This is the Venturing Angler Podcast. I'm Tim Harden. In this episode, we're talking with Fred Davis about fly fishing throughout the world, from his home waters in Qatar and beyond. Let's chat with Fred. Okay, we're here with Fred Davis. Fred, welcome to the Venturing Angler Podcast.
Thanks so much. Really awesome to be here, and keen. I'm not too sure what to expect, so very keen to get stuck in.
Yeah, great. Me too. You're always up to new, interesting, unique things, and when I'm seeing what you're up to on social media, I feel like I have a lot to learn, and hopefully that happens over the course of this conversation.
Oh, thanks. Awesome.
So for those who are listening, where are you located?
So right now I am based in Qatar. And it's been in the news recently with the Football World Cup and all of that. And I think before it got the World Cup, nobody really knew where Qatar was. It was just another little spot in the Middle East. We're basically in the middle of we're a peninsula on the northern side of the basically the Arabian Peninsula, sticking into the Arabian Gulf. And it's quite a small country. It's like 250 kilometers long by, I think it's like 100 kilometers wide. So it's tiny, almost completely surrounded by water. And I came out here because I wanted to travel more, and being a teacher in South Africa made that quite difficult. Whereas here you're earning, good money, and you've got a lot of freedom to travel. I'm 8 hours from almost anywhere in the world, so it's pretty nice and central. So that was my kind of motivation for coming out here.
Okay, so you're from South Africa originally?
Yes, born and raised South African. Parents, grandparents, all South African.
But for you, being where you are now enables more travel. That's interesting.
No, absolutely. South Africa's right at the bottom, and
True.
To get anywhere, we kind of always have to fly through a hub. So we'd have to fly through Qatar or Dubai or all the way up to England, and then go from there. The only real place that's close and easy internationally to fish is Southern and Central Africa and the Seychelles. Everywhere else is quite a mission.
I've never heard anybody say that like the most convenient place to fish would be the Seychelles. So that says a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah.
So what are your home waters then now?
Now, basically the Doha Bay in the Arabian Gulf, right off in front of my apartment here. We live on one of the reclaimed islands, and our tower, it's like a 17, 18 floor apartment block, sits right on the beach, and I jump on the water with my paddleboard, and within 5 minutes of paddling, into any number of species of fish, whether it's a queenfish, we get queenfish and they come up on the top and eat poppers, and are just absolutely epic. But you also get a variety of bream species, the sabati, the spangled emperors. You've got these little silver breams that you get on the flats that are proper like little tailing fish, and I think they're more difficult than bonefish, although not as big and they don't fight nicely, but it really keeps your eye in for when you're going to travel and fish international flats. And then you've got if you want to go boxing, you can go target the hamor, which it's the local name hamor for the grouper, the orange spot grouper, which hangs around the bridges and the rocks, and they like to bust you up. Running into the rock. So it's amazing. It is incredible. When I arrived here, I thought I was not going to have much fishing here locally, and within a few months we realized that it was actually surprisingly off the charts. So we haven't really looked back. It's kept us here a bit longer, I think, as well.
It sounds like really like a saltwater playground that most people are not aware of.
Absolutely. So Dubai was in the last few years put on the map by Nick at Ocean Active because he cottoned on that the guys flying through Dubai, heading down to Seychelles, obviously very often are having layovers, and the guys jump on the boat with him, and we basically 200-300 k's away from the end of this very similar fishery. Jump on the boat, and you've got the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, and the Burj Arab, another famous, right there behind you. And these guys are, catching golden trevally and queenfish and all sorts on top waters, and it's an in-out destination. It's perfectly suited to quick, easy fishing, which is, as you say, not many people know about it, but it's definitely fun.
Yeah, Nick Bowles, I knew about him because of Queenfish, and for me, actually, I do work with Off the Grid Studios, and before I started hanging out with those guys, they made that film Dubai on the Fly. And
yes.
For me, what I learned from the film, among other things, was Dubai is queenfish. And so when I first saw your queenfish images, I was like, oh, I wonder if he's going to Dubai. But you've got quite the queenfish fishery there. Yeah,
well, it's in the bigger scheme of things, it's the same. The Gulf it's very shallow. It's not big. And it's a very similar fishery. It's essentially the same kind of fishery where it's just on our doorstep, and it's actually quite crazy how good the fishing is. This afternoon I jumped on a friend's boat and we docked probably a nautical mile from my front door, and we went into the Blue Spangled Emperors over these big, beautiful coral bommy sections. You're kind of floating over it, and you're getting fish coming off, and you're in a spot where if it weren't for the skyline, you could be in the tropics. It's really quite something.
It's almost like Miami too, where you're in the middle of this world-class fishery, but you're also looking at urban settings. Yeah,
100%, completely urban. I've got a couple of photos where holding the fish, but behind me are cranes, and there's construction and work and everything with the World Cup. So it's this contrast. It's crazy.
Are there a lot of people fly fishing there?
No, I know of, I'll count them, 7 fly fishermen.
Okay.
We've discovered each other, and the power of social media, etc. And there are a lot of fishermen and the guys that fish, but there's definitely not the numbers that say we have at home or elsewhere. But in terms of fly fishing, we get together every now and again. We get a package of Mission magazines from Tudor, and we have a bride that's our barbecue, South African, barbecue and drink a few beers and talk rubbish. But there are very few of us here, and it's quite something. Guys will slow down their boat to try and work out as they drive past you on your paddleboard casting a fly. They will slow down and stare and kind of what on earth is this person doing? It's quite something. There's very often a crowd of people, well, not a crowd, but 2 or 3 people will be watching, especially the locals. If you're on the flat or somewhere, we'll watch for a long time and then come and quiz you and can't quite work out why you're fishing like this. The bait's better, that you're always told, but it's difficult to explain. But yeah, it's quite foreign.
Is Nick from South Africa?
I think he is, yes.
So I've never thought about this much until now, but between the Seychelles and you mentioned Tudor and yourself and Nick, a lot of new places, new saltwater destinations seem to be really being put on the map from South Africans. What would you attribute that to? Is it just proximity or coincidence?
I think it's a lot of little factors. Firstly, fishing at home is salt. Should I say the saltwater fishing at home is not easy. You don't just walk down, and it's tougher than here for sure. And you learn the hard ropes. So there are a lot of good fly fishermen coming out of South Africa, and then like anywhere, you taste it, you get a hunger, and off you go. And then also because the economic situation in SA is not fantastic, a lot of the younger guys, they see it as a way of getting out there and exploring and guiding and making a living. And then from there, guys are, also getting exploratory and getting out and about and really just finding stuff. I think there's still a sense of adventure, whether it's in Southern Africa, Central Africa or the rest of the world, I've always noticed that a lot of the South African chaps, and look, it's not exclusive to us because I've met Australians and Americans who have the same mentality, but go try stuff, go step out the comfort zone, go just do something different and see what you get rather than hide away. I think it's just part of our psyche to challenge ourselves. So yeah, and then, like you say, there's coincidence and all sorts of things, and we're lucky to have some incredibly unfished, especially in terms of fly fishing areas close to us in Africa, and the islands less so these days. But, 20 years ago, the Seychelles, there were areas that still weren't fished, and, it's given guys opportunity to really get out there and explore properly.
Yeah. When I moved to California years ago, there was great trout fishing, steelhead salmon. That's one great thing about California. Trout, steelhead salmon, bass, carp, there's such a variety. But all of those great fisheries were a good drive away. And what was close to me was the San Francisco Bay and then the West Coast. And I thought, and then some other bays too. I thought I was going to put myself on the map, which was something I cared about at that time, like being famous.
We all do. We all do at some stage, I think. It's,
right. So I mean, this was
it
was a long time ago, but I was like, I'm going to be famous for fly fishing for leopard sharks. That was the thing, and I got a Nautilus reel engraved with a leopard shark, which I still have. And I feel ridiculous about it because I have the only Nautilus reel with a leopard shark on it because I was so confident that I was going to figure out all these fisheries and catch all these leopard sharks, which people have. And I did find leopard sharks, but what it took just to get an understanding of what could be possible was an extraordinary amount of hard work and effort. And so when I see on your Instagram some of the things that you're doing, I just can't imagine what that has taken. And maybe it was different. Maybe, you paddled out and the fish were just there. But what was that discovery process like for you?
So if you're talking about here, I was quite lucky in that I literally just paddled out and that happened. And there was a busting shoal queenfish, and I was like, epic, here we go. And so, but, over the years with travel and stuff, it definitely doesn't always work like that. And even here, there are days where conditions look absolutely mint and you're going, right, I want to go try this, I want to do this, and they just absolutely come back skunked. And, it's part of why I love DIY. I've got nothing against guiding and having a guide and being guided, but there's something about that DIY experience where you go and you sniff it out and you figure out, and that one fish that you get in a week, that you've kind of worked it out, you've put that time in, and like that, that's the trophy, is that final fish. It doesn't have to be the biggest fish, it doesn't have to be, but it's this idea that, you've kind of figured this out, you've used what you've got, you've thought on your feet, you've hustled and made things work, and you've maybe not even figured out a fishery, but figured out a fish on a day, and that's awesome because you might come back tomorrow and it's completely different. And I think also here, what's nice is I've been able to figure out the fishery. So I now know what kind of day I'm looking at and whether the fish are going to be moving, what time of year, etc. Where obviously in the beginning it was hit and miss, but because it was on my doorstep, it was really easy to figure it out. But we're also talking about a type of fish that lends itself, the queenfish, it absolutely lends itself to a sport fishery. They're always hungry. They are not fussy. They eat off the surface or on the bottom and everywhere in between. And so they really are forgiving, and they fight brilliantly. They pull hard and they do cartwheels. It's everything you want from a game fish. So here, the discovery was quite quick and easy. But then the interesting part came out when we started looking elsewhere in the country, and how are we going to get to those reefs that we can see on Google Maps, or how are we going to fish these flats on the other side of the country? And then you there's a bit more figuring and a bit more time, and there's still areas here that I think could provide exceptional fishing, but we've just never had it because we obviously haven't got the stars to line up.
When I think of you, the first thing I think of is DIY, and it's really cool, it's really impressive, and I speak to guides on this podcast the majority of the time. But you've sent me photos before, and I'm like, I have no clue what fish that is. Like I see these species, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, but it's cool because, of the process of doing it on your own, and especially in new waters and elsewhere. I've gotten the impression, though I don't know for sure, that if you're going on vacation or something, you're trying to figure out new, what's happening in places that people aren't generally fly fishing.
Absolutely, and my darling wife, bless her, she is such a good sport because she knows that wherever we go, there's going to be a fly rod stuffed into a corner of a bag, or in a fly box, and there'll be some time taken out, or we will be going on a kayak to go see what we can see. And she gets involved, and sometimes we'll just lie on the beach and send me off, and other days we'll come with and fish with me, which is awesome. But it's essentially about just trying new stuff. Goes all the way back to university, where a really good friend of mine, Rex, he had a saying, and it was JFDI, and it basically, it's just fucking do it. So get an idea and just do it. Like, get out there and do it. Like, if we on a map would see a valley that runs into the middle of nowhere, put backpacks on and let's go see if there are trout up there. And we discovered some of the most beautiful streams and tributaries of rivers that few people ever fish, and it just was magic. And I think that's where that kind of bug bit.
The other day I found an old photo of me holding a bass, and bass was maybe like 4 pounds, a largemouth bass, and I sent it to a friend, and I was on the phone with him, and I was explaining how proud of myself I was. There was a big trout reservoir where there were stocked trout, and then there was a pond next to the reservoir, and I told people that I was going to go see if I could catch bass there. And I got made fun of because there was no bass there, but then I caught this big bass. And, that was, 30 years ago, maybe? No, not that long ago, but it was 25 years ago for sure. Maybe not that long ago, but it was a long time ago. And I still talk about that, with the same enthusiasm that I would talk about, catching something that's, like a big brown trout or something like that. So, for me, like, there's something that existed when I was a young angler that's hard to reclaim, which is like, you see a body of water, you're like, hey, let's see what can happen here. It's less structured in a way. It's you could pull up to a pond on a farm and feel like a sense of adventure because, the sky's the limit with what could happen. Do you feel like you're able to sort of reclaim part of what existed for many of us young anglers by taking this approach to so many of these waters?
I think that's a big part of still doing it like I do it, is that there's this, you're holding on to a kind of youthful belief that there's fish in every pond, and that they're all catchable, and that you're going to go and catch them. And it doesn't always work that way. You don't always catch those fish, and more often than not get skunked. But when, like you say, you have an idea, you go and you try it, and it works out. There's this real sense of achievement that you've, in a personal capacity, done something that is worthwhile for you in that moment. And and like you say, maybe other guys looking at you like, what are you doing? So what? But for me in that moment, there's this little bit of youthful discovery, and I suppose it keeps me young. So why I enjoy teaching. It's that, being connected to a youthful part of myself that keeps me young and happy and excited, and hopefully I can pass it on to my kids one day.
Yeah. So beyond your home waters, what are some of the places that you've fished?
That I've fished, all over. I've been very privileged. Privilege is a word we bandy about, but I really have been out. Starting in South Africa, my folks always said that, we're not going to travel as a family overseas. We're going to get to know our country. And my dad was still is, fly fisherman and fisherman. my grandfather on my dad's side was a fly fisherman. My grandfather on my mother's side was like rock and surf and conventional fishing. So wherever we went all over the country, we fished. It was just something that happened. And then once this gave me a love for travel and discovering places, because even at a young age, I was being exposed to these places within just South Africa that were just so different from everyday life, and it was so awesome. And then later on, I got to travel to the Seychelles through family connections. That was my first real big kind of international fishing trip. Before then, though, I'd done, Zambia, Zimbabwe, a little bit of normal fishing up in Namibia, Mozambique, so Southern Africa, Lesotho for trout. Later on, kind of as we spread, it was, we got to go up to Central Africa, Uganda, places, and then it was South America. So what happened was I went and I worked on a yacht in the Seychelles at the end of my first year of university. The family friend ran a yacht charter company, and they were the very first guys to go down to St. Joe's, etc., and actually open the fly fishing down there. And that is like, you're talking late 80s, early 90s, before it was a thing, and they opened that up, and I got to go work on these yachts, and I just scrubbed decks and fished when I wasn't working, and it was just an incredible experience. And then I went back twice, and then I actually got a job there, a teaching job at a school, and I lived there for 3 years, and I really got to see the outer atolls. When I finished in the Seychelles, I then did 7 months in South America. So I started in Colombia and worked my way all the way down to Tierra del Fuego and just basically fished. Incredible experiences, whether I was getting, rained out of the Berea marshlands and not getting to throw a single fly, or catching golden dorado in tiny streams, or, sea run trout and the local robalo, I don't even know what they call it in Tierra del Fuego, and everything in between, trout in the craziest places, and indigenous fish that I still don't have a clue what they're called, just a piece of water, you fish it, and in between, got to fish South America really nicely, and I think fairly fully for most, in terms of most international travelers. Most people come in for a week or two, fish a single location, and then duck. I really got to experience South America as a whole. Then Fiji, we went a couple of years ago to Fiji. I fished in between Indonesia, but we more surfed in Indonesia, which was fine. I love to surf and anything in the ocean, Sri Lanka, but there's still, a lot of places I'd like to go to. And COVID obviously put a stop on a lot of our travels. We had plans to go to a few places. I've been very lucky not all over the world, but a lot of really cool destinations.
Do you, with all of these places you've been, do you have any favorites?
It's a difficult one. Favorites. A favorite place. I think about one of my favorites. Kind of, talking about discovery thing after trying something was the golden dorado in the Salta region, where we had kind of knocked on farmers' doors on the Juramento River and got permission, and I'd broken a rod, and I was really just like I'm never going to get an Argentinian golden dorado. I'm never, I'm not going to get this. And then we were chatting to this chap, I don't even know, he was at the backpackers, and he said, no, you've got to go up there and up there. And we drove up this road and eventually came across a little village, and, like broken Spanish and broken English. And we ended up hiking up a valley for about 7-8 kilometers and came across the stream that was no bigger than a small trout stream. And I was like, oh, it's a pretty river, but I can't imagine there much being here. And I put a fly in the first pond, and all hell erupted, and spent the next 6 hours catching like 4 to 8 pound golden dorado in the stream that you could jump across in most places. It was absolutely unbelievable. So, I mean, that is a moment. It's definitely one of my favorites. If I ever get to go back there, I'll be lucky. But then, somewhere like the Seychelles, if you just want to go and catch a variety of fish and be absolutely fished out at the end of a week, Seychelles. I love fishing my home waters in the garden routes of South Africa for a species called the spotted grunter, which is, it's not unlike a permit in behavior. Feeds on crustaceans, tails a lot, comes into skinny water. It's got a real bream look to it, gets nice and big, up to like 80 centimeters. Fantastic sight fishing fish. I absolutely love chasing those. Many hours of frustration. I think of Murchison Falls in Uganda, where I caught a Nile perch on fly, which was about a meter long, which is a small Nile perch, but that was also the end of like this mission. We had gone hiking in the Rwenzori Mountains, which are these crazy high mountains in Central Africa that have glaciers and stuff on them, and then we come down and we went up to the White Nile there, and at Murchison Falls, which is the entire Nile comes through a gorge that's about 5-6 meters wide, and it's just this immense amount of power. And below you have these huge, like, just this churning water that's just, and in there lived these Nile perch, and we went and we threw flies in there, and also just, I was like, what are we doing? This is just the craziest water, fishing 12 weights in just wild water, and ended up hooking this, on a fly with a massive fish, and, fighting this fish and seeing crocodiles downstream the day before and all sorts of it. There we got it. And so that for me, and another like absolute favorite. But I think I just love fishing. So wherever I might be, I thoroughly enjoy being on the water, and whether it's on my own or with friends, it's just a good place to be. It's wholesome, it's healthy, it's happy. Yeah.
Do you prefer saltwater over freshwater? Because I always assumed you were a salt guy, but then when I asked about favorite species, I was surprised to hear about Dorado and perch and so forth.
No, I think I love the salt. I think there's so many more angles to it, but there's something about the finesse of, especially presenting a dry fly to a rising rainbow, or even more so a brown trout, or working out the big browns fishing streamers. There's a different finesse to it. You look in my cupboard, there's everything from a 13 weight down to a 1 weight, and it's the whole rack, and I just thoroughly enjoy it. I don't have a favorite. If you stick me on a trout stream, I will enjoy that trout stream and I'll get the best out of it. If you put me on a flat with GTs and permit, I'm going to fish my heart out there as well. If I had to choose, I'd probably say the salt, just because I love the challenge of the salt, and the ocean itself for me it's quite a big part of my life. So I'll probably always default to the salt. But throwing a fly, I think, is just it's a process. It always is a process, and I love process because it's about figuring out. It's not just clanking a piece of bait, and I don't mind clanking a piece of bait out once in a while and fishing like that, but there's more to it always. And that's what my dad always said. He said, there's always a process, and there's thought behind it, and there's, whether you're trying to work that trout out in the tail, or you are trying to get that bonefish, cut that bonefish off and present to it without speaking it in like 3 inches of water, there's a process to it, and it's probably more like hunting than throwing a bait out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of process. That's always, well, I say it's always been the best. There was a time when I didn't mind pulling up to some pellet fed fish, but now it's all about the process, even if it's just one fish a day. Are there certain species that you favor more than others? Do you have a favorite there?
Yeah, I absolutely love, there's a species here called blackhead sea bream, which I had to go and do some proper research to find out. I've never come across it before. It's a small bream species, very pretty, very silver, with kind of a black mark on its side, and it comes onto the flats here, and it is skinny, it's stubborn, it's fussy. You'll have 20 fish follow your fly right to your rod tip and then kind of look at you and just swim away casually. So I love them just because even though they don't fight hard or anything, it's always a challenge. And it's like, I feel like I've accomplished something every time I hook one. And it's like working it out and trying to find a fly that is going to get them every time. And it's like I'm going smaller and smaller, and these tiny little shrimp patterns and all sorts of. It's like I'm actually now fishing a 5-weight, so it's almost like I'm fishing a freshwater setup for them. They're not big fish, but they're really difficult. But at the same time, I absolutely love finding the queenfish on the top and putting a popper through them and just having that explosion on the popper, and just having all hell break loose and making paddleboard being towed all over the place. And so a species definitely. Probably my favorite is the Granta at home, just because I really cut my teeth on difficult saltwater fly fishing with that species of fish. And, for a long time, people would say, you can't catch them on fly. And, they're very catchable on fly, but it's as always, hard work. I love permit. And that's probably my biggest love-hate affair is a permit. In any shape or size, I don't mind whether it's. I chased permits on the Colombian coast. I never got one, so I haven't got the Falcatus yet, and I'd love to go and spend time in the Bahamas or somewhere. But the Blocky in the Indian Ocean is just the prettiest thing, and it is just as difficult, I think, as Falcatus, and I absolutely love it. And we fish for them here in Oman, which is a little bit, it's an hour flight or kind of a 20-hour drive. And they feed on these big sand flats and in the shore breaks. And that was my last trip was across there. And I think I might have sent you a couple of photos, but we got a few. But I think if there's one fish that I could choose to kind of spend a lot more time on, it would be a permit. And I don't mind which permit. But yeah, permits are. Actually, yeah, permit will probably be my biggest love-hate out there, definitely.
Oman looks like it's an interesting fishery. If I'm not mistaken, you're often walking the beaches, right, for these permits?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, you almost always. In fact, you are always. You walk in the beaches, and you're very often fishing for them in the shore break or in the white water. It's so different to targeting them on the traditional flats, in that flat setup, where the first time I came across permit were in the Seychelles on the flats, the classic tailing fish doing its thing. Now suddenly you've got beaches where you've got waves rolling in, and they'll cruise up on their sides in water that is 2 inches deep to eat the ghost crabs and the other crustaceans right up in the shore wash, and then they duck again. And if you watch, there's a chap who kind of discovered it, Raymond Toya, he's a artist, and he's just moved back to the States, but absolute legend. And he pretty much unlocked the permits in Oman, and he's got a lot of videos and stuff. And you see him, he's standing almost, and you stand like 20 feet up the beach, and you're hooking fish in water that you kind of like, there shouldn't be a fish of that size in there, especially of that shape. It's like a permit. You think of this tall, round fish, and you're hooking them sometimes in 3 inches of water. It's absolutely wild.
I hadn't heard his name in a while, but in the early days of the Venturing Angler, he was always posting DIY videos of fly fishing for permit, and that was some cool stuff. The last podcast that I did a couple of days ago was with a guy who does a bit of travel, and I did not expect so much of the podcast was going to be about permit. And he's somebody who is a guide in Montana. He's been all around the world, but the podcast was permit. And it was his, it was his passion that came out. And I wouldn't have been able to redirect the conversation if I wanted to. What is it with these anglers like you and him maybe, and many others that I talk to, where they've been around the world? Will Flack he's somebody who I talked to a bit, and he came up in that last conversation. That have been everywhere, done everything, and then it's this obsession with permit that sort of takes over their soul. what is that for you?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of things. Growing up, I could only ever read about them, or Walker's Cay or things like that. Getting bootleg copies of Walker's Cay Chronicles and stuff like that, and that's what the legends caught. The pallets and the crays and the browns. That's permit. That was it. And like it was always. It seemed to me like the holy grail. And then when I got to fish for the other permits, the Indo-Pacific, the Blocky, it was always like it gave you just enough to keep you there. It's that beautiful girl at the bar. She gives you just enough of a look, just enough of a, but you're never quite there. You never quite, you always feel like, yes, you're there. No, it doesn't quite, you don't quite stack up as to what you thought. And that's what it is. It's this, they are these pretty fish that are with these big eyes, and they inspect a fly, they look at a fly, they know what they're eating, and so part of it is you really have to present properly and have the right fly on the end. They're not going to make lots of mistakes, and then it's this woven in the law of permit fishing, woven in with the fact that they are just difficult to catch, and you catch them in such pretty places, and there's a sense of accomplishment when you catch one. And look, part of it's probably we build them up, so we create our own idols, and I think many of us do it. It's a permit. Check that permit. There are other species out there that are just as difficult, but they don't have the legacy, they don't have that history, they don't have all of that interwoven. But just to go and find them and catch them, it's an accomplishment. And then to go do it in a place like Oman, where you have days where you're walking a 20 kilometer kind of round walk up and down a beach in 38 degree, 40 degree heat. You're carrying everything, you're sleeping, you're camping on the beach at night. There's in a place with no hotels, there's nothing around you. You really are, like, if something happens on those beaches, you could well be in a lot of trouble. You're that isolated and that alone. And my first few trips were all on my own. And, walking into places where there's no cell phone reception, nothing, and you just kind of trust in your own abilities and your own, your own ability to get out. And these days I do it differently. I've got a young family, etc. So I would carry a Garmin or GPS if I'm going back to certain areas, or something I can make contact with, because there are other responsibilities. But when I was younger, you could do those things. Just cruise up a mountain, right, up a cliff where, if it rains, you're either swimming or you're waiting for a helicopter kind of thing, and and that's also all part of the adventure and part of the permit fishing for me here. It's given it's a whole extra angle to it. So yeah, but permit, they weasel under your skin, and they just hang around.
That's, yeah. I think I'm trying to recall. I think I've only taken one permit specific focus trip. That's debatable, but the people I was with were insane.
Yeah.
One guy in particular turned his life upside down for this fish, and he'd caught them. I always feel like permitted or fish, that's like a bucket list species. People do everything they can to catch one, and they're supposed to move on, and then what ends up happening is it becomes this obsession. So maybe I should avoid them.
Yeah, look, I know very few anglers who have gone and caught them and have said, I'm done with them now. That's cool, I've ticked it. Most people say, I wouldn't mind getting another one. Where there are lots of other species where I've ticked the box, that's good, I've done that. It's not the end of the world if I don't get another one. But permit has this ability, and for me, having seen the Atlantic ones, and I thought I was going to get another chance at them on this one area in Colombia, and then the weather changed, the weather gods didn't play the game, and that was it. That was me blown out, and I've been wanting to go back so badly to somewhere in the Caribbean or the Bahamas, and just to try and get one. And I'm trying to, Dan, I think we should. Dan's my wife. I think we should, plan a Bahamas trip. I think we need to go.
Yeah.
And she sailed all over there, so she's like, I don't really want to go back there. I'm like, no, come on, we got to go. But it's a fish that does get under your skin, and I know a lot of guys exactly what you say. It's like, oh, we're going to catch a permit. They catch a permit. It's like, I want to catch another one, and I want to catch another one, and it might be months, it might be years between trips, but they focus on that and they tie their flies for that. They do everything for that, and it's that fish.
Yeah.
But I suppose they're other fish for other people. I know guys who like that about trout or brown trout. Or my dad, I think, was a bit like that with brown trout. For him, a brown trout is the pinnacle, and getting one on a fly it really is something special. And I suppose everybody has their poison.
Yeah, that's true. But there's, I agree with that, and I have seen that with trout anglers for sure. But having lived in Northern California, it's the steelhead guys, and then of course the permit guys that, they'll do anything for those fish. It's crazy.
So now there's a species that I think I must stay away from, and that's the steelhead. No, honestly, I've read a lot of books about it and spoken to guys, and I think that's something that would probably hook me very badly, and I would probably spend far too much time. And obviously, they're very far away from me here, so it wouldn't really work out that well. But they seem like a fish that just also guys get completely obsessed with. A friend of mine was telling me, I can't remember the name of the book, but he's an aquatic scientist who studied them, and he writes all about his observations. He just observes the steelhead for months. I must find out the book, but that for me, it's like even the scientists go in there and just give these fish their all, and I just feel like that there's a myth behind them, and probably it's the same with the permit. There's this myth, and there's this whole backstory and personality and everything that comes with these fish that just make them that much more. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but yeah, just people want them that little bit more and that little bit more, and yeah.
Yeah, there was a surfing film, because you mentioned surfing earlier. I don't remember what it was. It was Step into Liquid or one of those big documentaries that came out a while ago. And someone said something like, because surfers are always stereotyped for sounding like they're stoned or dumb or something like that. And it's because, in part, they're trying to explain something that is like a, profound experience that can't be put into words. And so it sort of makes people sound dumb. And I feel like that's steelhead are that way too, where there's something about fog and rain and frigid temperatures and big trees and a fish that almost doesn't exist that people will do anything for, and you can't really explain why. I was driving up to the McCloud River once, which is where rainbows from all around the world come from, right? When I'm catching rainbow trout in Argentina, they came from California, the McCloud River. Yep. And I'm on my way to the McCloud, which is such a cool place, and I called a friend to see if he wanted to go, and he was like, but those aren't steelhead. And he meant it. But why would I want to catch something that's not a steelhead? And it's like, well, it's the McCloud River, and it's an hour from your house. Why wouldn't you want to do this? But it's that. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but San Francisco, California has, it's strange. It's called the Golden Gate Angling and Casting Club. I think the city built this fly fishing club in 1933, and they've paid for it ever since. And it's a lodge and these big casting ponds for spey rods. And these guys, some of them do not fish for anything except steelhead, and they just practice their casting all year. They tie flies all year, and then when fall comes or late summer or spring, you can go different places. There's, the winter run is what a lot of those guys care about. That's what it is. They give up everything just to fish those months, and I always see parallels between steelhead anglers and permit anglers. So yeah, it might be dangerous.
It's a little bit like the rock climbers, isn't it? That whole dirt bag van life. They'll do anything to climb certain places, and they will happily live out the back of a van for months on end. Short-term jobs so that they're in the right place for the right season. And look, I haven't been I haven't done the States at all, and it's definitely on the list. And I really want to. I've got high hopes of doing a road trip from basically BC all the way down of these years. But whether that happens or not, it's a whole different story, but we can dream. But I've definitely, I've read so many different things. They talk about the steelhead and stuff, and that seems like a fish that is next level in terms of cult following, almost more so than the permit, because as you say, it's like these guys, they'll go. And I've seen the videos of the guys practicing their spey casting in a pond up there above the Golden Gate Bridge, and doing their thing, and that's all they do. Like, all they do. There's no other, Whereas I think permit fishermen will still go and lower themselves to catch a few other things in between, and keep fishing in between the permit seasons and trips. But those guys are so addicted, focused. I don't know what to call it. But that is all they do, and it's quite something.
Yeah, it's
a lot of respect to that.
It's perfect that you mentioned climbers. I don't climb. I'm afraid of heights. Apparently, some climbers are afraid of heights, but I've never climbed. I will never climb, but I watch climbing movies almost every single day, and that's true. And it's because I feel like for me, that's what captures the spirit that I gravitate towards with fishing. And you definitely see that with steelhead for sure. Be careful with that, especially BC down. A trip that's BC down, are you crazy? You're just asking for it.
Yeah, no, asking for all sorts of trouble. Yeah.
Oh man. You're gonna. Yeah, soon I'll see you with a spey rod. Actually, speaking of rods, I've wondered about this before. It's going back to an earlier subject in the podcast, but when you're at home and you're going out for the day, are you bringing several rods with you? Especially, you've got such a variety of fish.
Yeah, it very, very much depends on where I'm fishing, and also, if I'm at home, say South Africa, and we're going Granta, you look at the conditions for the day, and it'll be anything from a 6 to a 9, just depending on the wind. But out here, I very often carry 2 rods, so I'll have a 6 and a 10, or an 8 and a 10, depending on the wind, just because you get a lot of schoolie queenfish around, and so they're kind of like forearm length to probably, so what's that, 50 centimeters, 40 centimeters to about 70 centimeters, and they are very manageable because they're very clean fighters on a 6 weight or an 8 weight, and you have a lot of fun. But if we happen to be up against the structure, etc., then I do want something that I can pull a fish out of the structure, and very often a 10 will be better for that. The big Sabati bream, I think I sent you a photo. It's that big silver one, and he's a bruiser as well and lives around the structure. And then 6 weight, you're going to get hurt. So out here, definitely I'll carry very often two rods with me, almost always. But it very much depends where we are. Also, if I'm walking a beach in Oman, it'll be the same thing, an 8 and a 10. If I'm flat in the Seychelles, it'll be the 12, 13 and a 10 or a 9. Sometimes 3 rods, one set up for triggers, one set up for permit and bonefish, and one set up for GTs or whatever you might be doing.
You've touched on this a little bit in the podcast so far, but what would you say, because it's a fascinating question for me to ask, and the answers are fascinating. People are just, this appetite for travel, it sort of controls people. I spoke to somebody once who said he never unpacks a bag because it means it's closer to, staying home and not having something on the horizon. So he always has a duffel bag in the middle of his room. For you, what is it about travel that lights that fire?
It's just getting to experience things that are out of your normality, out of your everyday. I've grown into it, but I was lucky, as I mentioned, folks taking me all over the place, things that were different. But a trip can be successful whether you catch a fish or not. If you've engaged with people in the community, if you've engaged with a place, if you've looked beyond just the fish you're after, that is really what makes travel awesome. Because otherwise you might as well just stay in your backyard and do what you need to do at home and catch what you've got to catch at home, because every destination is more than just the fish or the wave or the, if you're a climber, it should be more than the climb and then the rock. The people you meet, the sometimes friends you make, the experiences that you have, the food that you eat, like if you're in Peru, eat a guinea pig, because that's what they do, and experience it and sit down for a local meal. If you in Oman, have camel stew and have a proper Bedouin meal and try and have a conversation and with somebody about, the changes that they've seen in their lifetime in an area, because, what might seem awesome to you and pristine might be really second rate to somebody who's grown up there, and learn about what, be aware of the world around us and, leave footprints and memories as much as possible. So, yeah. But I understand that having the duffel bag packed, I was like that when I was younger. I was always ready to travel. There was, I used to, especially when I first moved out here, and even at home, you'd scour the flight specials. Where's this going? What can I do? What can I afford? I bought a 4x4 early on, and I had to kit it out so you could disappear up to the Cederberg, which is one of the mountain ranges close to Cape Town, or up into the Karoo or an area in South Africa. We'd go fish up to the Orange River and chase yellowfish or something like that. So I was always ready to hustle, and I used to get quite itchy feet if I hadn't traveled or been out of town, for a while. So it was really important for me when I was younger. Obviously focus changes, and now having a little one who's just shy of a year, it's definitely put anchors out, and not anchors I'm upset by, but I'm looking forward to a time when I can pass my love of travel and experiencing things onto her, and then her sibling when the sibling arrives, and one day. So it's also about seasons. I think I'm out of my hardcore DIY season, but that doesn't mean we won't go on lots of camping trips where there just might be good fishing.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I have a 1-year-old, and she's not affecting my ability to travel. She's affecting my interest.
Yes,
and the passion.
100%.
Yeah, the passion is there. I'm going to be traveling next week, but it's like I can't wait to get home. I can't wait to leave, and I can't wait to get home. And so it's an interesting thing that happens with that. But I know that you're not. You're going to be punching airline miles. What's on your bucket list?
Bucket list
For species or destinations?
I still want to fish an English chalk stream.
That's
even if it means, I do. I want to go and catch a wild brown in the chalk stream on a dry fly. It's something I've always wanted to do. I think it's just, it's again about the experience, and then go have a beer at the pub afterwards, and sit over the River Test or wherever it might be. But that's something I'd love to do. I would love to catch a golden Masia in India or somewhere similar up there. What else? A peacock bass. I really wouldn't mind getting a peacock bass. I didn't get one in South America. We got blown out by weather and it was wrong season, so that was just the way it was. But yeah, I don't know. I think there are a couple of salmonoid species in Eastern Europe that I think are really interesting. The hucho, I think it's called, in the Danube system, and it's under pressure and it grows massive, every 30 pounds or something. I don't need to go catch a 30-pounder, but I'd love to go catch a unique. I think any unique fish that is in its home environment, a marble trout in in Slovenia or somewhere like that, or the in Asia, there are just so many different species of fish that you can go and catch. Giant snakehead in Malaysia, or or they've got their own species of Masia in Thailand, or things that are unique to a place, because I think that also adds to the value of that travel. It's not just going to catch not a generic species, but you could go catch sailfish in any number of places around the world, whether it's South Africa, northern, off our Zululand coast, or northeastern South Africa, or anywhere in the Indo-Pacific, or even Atlantic. Whereas there's some species that you only get in certain places that make them really unique, and I think that's really cool. So anything like that, I'm always up for a challenge. But yeah, I don't have any specifics. I think anywhere I travel these days, it's just about going and getting the big picture and experiencing things.
I'm with you. Well, for those who want to, follow you and see what you're up to and see some of these species we've talked about, where should people go?
So there are a couple of places, and I need to be better because I'm not posting that much anymore. But myself and a friend started a blog called Feathers and Fluoro, I think in 2011, after one of our first atoll trips. And that has since linked up with the Mission Fly magazine, so it's hosted on the same website. Although I've been pretty slack with that, but that was an awesome journey, and that kind of drove a lot of chat and travel was the blog over the years, because it was always about trying to tell a story and trying to bring about this, sharing these experiences, because I think sharing is so important. But then also just on my Instagram, which you probably will be disappointed because we've got lots of baby stuff nowadays. But yeah, I think a great place, and it's actually a really awesome archive, is the blog that we have. Because you can go back and go dig, and there are notes from all over, from South America, from Central Africa, from Seychelles, Fiji, etc. Also a couple of articles in the magazine. That's probably the very best place. But if people really want to, they're welcome to follow me on FJ Davis 1, I think it is, on Instagram, and that's probably the next best place.
Yeah, and I have to say, I don't think I've ever said this before, but years and years and years ago, I wanted there to be a saltwater version of The Venturing Angler, and I got something rolling, but then I saw what you were up to, and I'm like, no, this is cooler. Yeah, so I retreated from that. But yeah, I recommend everyone check out Feathers and Fluoro, and of course the Mission. You're sometimes in there as well, so
yeah.
Well, good. Well, I've as you know, I've been wanting to have this conversation for quite a long time, and so I thank you for coming on. And I'm always learning when I follow what you're up to, and it was good to learn more. And I can't wait to see what adventures are on the horizon.
Well, hopefully there are a few, because I mean, that's as you know, having a little one, that definitely changes your focus. And like you said, you kind of go on a trip and you're kind of like, oh, I'm missing the family. Like, when am I going to get back? But there will always be adventures, and, just in the backyard. And also, I think that's something that everybody must remember. And it was an important lesson for me, is that, I think there's some hashtag called micro adventures or mini adventures or something. But an adventure doesn't have to be this big mission to a far-off destination where you're putting yourself necessarily in harm's risk or in harm's way or anything like that. Sometimes it's just checking out your backyard. What have you got around that corner, or what's in that pond, and that can be just as satisfying and just as awesome as going off and fishing some far-off place. It might not have the social media kudos, but it definitely deep down satisfies something that's really important. And backyards are awesome. There's a lot to be said for your backyard.
That's right. Yeah, I've been taking my daughter to the boat ramp. That's about 10 minutes from the house.
Awesome.
And she watches the river, and boats getting launched and coming in, and she gets so excited, like river, and that spirit's contagious. Especially if you put yourself in the right state of mind.
Yeah.
It's the Yellowstone River. I don't know why I keep traveling 7,000 miles, but I've got the Yellowstone River 10 minutes away. So we all have special places near us. So it's always important to remember that. Well, good. Well, thanks for coming on. And,
no, thank you for having me. And I thoroughly enjoyed that.
And let's do this again.
I'll be happy to. I think we can talk a lot of nonsense. I'm always keen.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on.
Tim, thank you so much, and have a good day that side.